Hi, I'm Ashley Rooney from the Lexington Remembers World War II Committee. And today I'm with Wilda Ward, who was married to one of our World War II vets. And she knew him from when she was a very small girl right here in Lexington. She met him riding horses over near Grove Street. So Wilda, where did Alan live?
Alan lived at 63 Gleason Road, which is up near Parker School in the Manor section.
Right. Okay. And when you at one point moved out of Lexington and your family moved over to Lincoln,
Right.
How did you still see him? Still riding horses?
Yes. By that time, we'd lived in Lexington for a couple of years at that point. And so all of the young men that lived around Gleason Road and were Alan's age, they used to come over to be with my father. And whenever he had auctions, of course, they would lead the cows out and so forth. And when he was selling calves, we all were there letting the calves suck our fingers. So we all had little interaction over the years.
Yeah.
And just, we're almost like family with that little group of friends. And we stayed friends until they died.
Oh.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. There were several of us that married the people that Norman and Hildy Woodward got married, and they lived on the Manor in Gleason Road. They lived the next Dexter Road.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of us married these same fellows that we had been good friends with all the way growing up.
Well, which is kind of lovely when you think about it. It's the way it used to be. When Pearl Harbor came.
Yes.
Did Alan sign up then?
Yes. And Pearl Harbor was December 7th. Alan left December 27th.
Right.
So interesting also, a little interesting thing. Three of his friends, his very close friend was Francis McMahon from Bedford.
Mm-hmm.
And Sumner Leonard from Lexington. He lived right near the high school. They were in high school together. The three of them enlisted together, hoping they could stay together through the war. Well, it ended up that by January 5th, Alan was in California, Sumner was in the middle of the country, and Franny was here in Westview. And they never saw each other again until the end of the war.
Did they all join the Army, Air Force? What did they join?
Yes, yes. And their serial numbers go right together, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, shit. But never saw him. Okay. So he went into the U.S. Army Air Force?
Air Force, right. It wasn't the Air Force by itself. It was the Army Air Force.
The Army Air Force. And he was stationed where?
Well, at beginning, he was stationed in California, where they sent him there, and he went to the Boeing School of Aeronautics in Oakland.
Uh-huh.
And he graduated from there. Now, I have a picture of his graduation here. I don't know if you can see it or not.
Let's
and
see.
You wouldn't know Alan because he's right in the very middle of it. I can't.
Okay, lift it up higher. Lift it up higher. Okay. There's a lot of light on it. Oh, there you go.
There.
Okay, that's a good.
He's right about in the middle, which is close enough.
Okay, so like
it shows that it's Boeing School of Aeronautics.
Right. Now you have another picture of them that you showed me the other day. A very cute picture.
Yeah, this is my favorite picture.
Yeah. Now, when he went off, were you already boyfriend, girlfriend, in love?
I was 14.
Oh, you were 14. Okay.
And yes, I was very much in love, and hopefully he was, but he was 19 at the time. And we'd been close friends for a long time. He was always very kind to me, and but we really, our whole time together, you might say, was through the mail.
Oh.
For
so
3 years.
You started writing letters, right?
He started in January. He wrote to my folks to ask if it was okay if he wrote to me.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he had a crush on you, too. Okay. Yeah. So he started writing, and you wrote back, and you told him about what was happening in high school and what was going on here?
He was at Boeing at that time, yeah. So I just knew what he was doing there. And then from there, he came home to Westfield for just stay over until he went to England. And his mother and father and my mother and myself drove out to Springfield and were able to spend a few hours with him before he went overseas. And then I didn't see him again for 3 years, 10 months, and 27 days.
Wow. You remember the time.
Oh, I'll never forget it.
Oh.
We were married 36 years when he died. And I don't think we were married as long as he was overseas.
Okay. So when he went overseas, that had to be really hard for you. You must have been very worried about him. There
Of
you
course,
were,
by the day, yes. I was so glad that he wrote. We each wrote twice a week. Of course, I wrote whenever I felt like it. Maybe it was more, but at least Mondays and Thursdays was our make sure that we wrote, so that we had an idea when a letter was coming from each other.
Now
And I think for the whole war, Mondays and Thursdays, I wrote to Alan.
But you told me a story that when he was in Africa, you didn't hear from him for 9 months.
9 months. Nobody heard from him at all. And I understand that at one point they had flown over North Africa. He was troop carrier. They flew over North Africa, dropped the troops that he was carrying. They had to circle the field until those troops took the field over from the enemy and were able to land because they didn't have gas to get back to France.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, these were things we didn't find out like that until it was over.
Were you panicked with those 9 months? Did you think he was?
Oh, it was terrible. The only thing that was okay was, I'll say it like this, as of today, we hadn't got any news from the War Department that anything had happened.
Oh.
So it must be, and then other people were talking that they weren't hearing from their folks either. And they just weren't allowed to write. They were right in the thick of a whole bunch of things, and they weren't allowed to write.
It had to be absolutely terrifying for
It was terrible. It was terrible. But
you were about how old at that point?
Alan would have been like 19, 20. He would have been like 20, 21.
Oh. And
Yeah.
so you were 5 years younger.
4.5.
It was just 4.5. Okay. So you were 16.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, so then he heard from him in Africa, and then what happened?
From Africa, I think he went up for a while to Brindisi in Italy. And there was one time when he flew over to Yugoslavia, which it was then, dropped some supplies or some people, I'm not sure just what it was, and on the way back, they were shot down. Now, at that time, Alan was one of a crew of 5 on the C-47 that he was flying and loved to fly. In fact, I have a C-47 here that someone made for me. I'm going to show it to you because it's important.
Yes. And don't these planes fly over to Hanscom occasionally?
Yes, they're still in service.
They're still in service.
They call it, I think, a D6 now.
Okay. So was he shot down? Was he shot down over Yugoslavia?
Over the GNC.
Shot down over the GNC.
And Alan at that time was the radio operator and part of the 5-man crew that flew that plane.
Mm-hmm.
And when the plane, of course, got into the ground, into the water, and just as the plane sank, the PBY came over the horizon to rescue them.
Yes.
So it turned out, for Alan, to be quite an interesting experience.
Now, what's a PBY?
That's another airplane that would come and be able to land on the water and serve to save people, pick them up out of the water and things like that. So they would have come in and landed on the water, picked up the crew, and taken them back to their
the 5-man crew. Okay. Wow, he was a lucky person.
Wasn't he lucky? Then there was another time, did I tell you about this, that he was stationed in India? Yes, he was stationed in India, and they called it the CBI area, China, Burma, India. And for 4 months, he and his crew flew in that plane over the hump I wonder if people remember that, but that was flying through all of those horrible mountains over there.
The Himalaya.
In the Himalayas, right. 75 or 80%, you can look it up in the records, 75 to 80% of the crews never made it back. They used their crack crews for that assignment, and they were only put out there for 4 months at a time. But he was stationed there in India, which they flew from, and carried supplies over the hump and back. And luckily, he made it just fine.
And so he carried supplies to the Asiatic front over in Burma.
That's right. I'm not sure where he landed in that area, but it was either China, Burma, or India.
Yeah, and they had a terrible time over there.
It was terrible.
He certainly got to see a lot of the world.
He did. Then he came back and he was stationed for the rest of the time in Italy. I think the town was Brindisi. And that's my phone ringing, but I'm not going to take it.
No, I think it's mine.
Oh.
I shut everything off now. I'm in Italy.
Okay,
go on.
So from there, as I say, he was in Italy and doing his things. At that point, things had simmered down a little bit, and Alan was a professional guitar player. And at that point, he had joined the Yankee Rhythm Commandos, and it was a pretty good-sized band there in the Air Force, and he was the guitar player in that.
The Yankee
Rhythm Commandos.
Okay.
That was the name they called themselves.
Commandos. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were well known in the Air Force.
They were well known in that race. He was in the 12th Air Force, and they were well known in that.
Okay, the 12th Air. Okay. Yeah, I didn't ask you what was his unit. So it was the 12th.
That was the 12th Air Force, and it was the troop carrier units.
Okay. Okay. So he was playing the guitar now. Things were a little calmer.
He had played before he went into the service. He was with a group before then, and he played professionally for almost all his life.
Was that his job?
No, that was his avocation. He worked for the Frost and Higgins Company in Arlington. He was the landscape director.
Oh.
And enjoyed that very, very much, and was with them for 20 odd years. But weekends he was playing the guitar, weddings and all kinds of things all over New England.
And you were acting in plays.
Not then. At that point I was teaching kindergarten, and I had my own school through that time called Lincoln Country Day School.
Oh yeah.
And that went on for 20 years. Yeah.
So let's go back. He comes home. When did he come home that you could get married?
All right. His mother was very sick, and he was on the way home from Italy, coming through South America. And his mother was very sick. Looking back on it, I think she had Alzheimer's.
Oh.
But we didn't know about Alzheimer's then. It was called hardening of the arteries.
Yeah.
And she had been very sick, so the family had notified the Red Cross to see if Alan could come home. And it was so lucky that he did. And I'll just backtrack a little bit. Through the times the times we were waiting for Alan, of course, I had gotten very friendly with his family and with his mother and his father, his sisters and brothers and so forth. And so the family had gotten in touch with Red Cross, and they got Alan home. And he was home, and he actually was home like 3 or 4 weeks before she died. But lucky, she knew we were planning on being married at that time. And we got married on Sunday, and she died on Tuesday. But we were so glad she knew.
Was she there at the wedding?
No, she was home in bed.
Okay.
But she knew.
Getting married.
Yeah, she had told her husband to be sure and wear his favorite ring and his good clothes, and so she knew we were getting married. And I'm so glad she had the time to see Alan and be with him for a couple of weeks.
Right. Right.
And so we got married on July 15th, and the war was over in August.
Okay, so he had to go back.
He had to go back, yeah.
Okay, let
He
me go
was
back
home.
a little to the wedding. Um, I have read that many of the women who got married during the war used parachute silk for their wedding dresses.
Oh, isn't that nice? No, I didn't.
Did you have to give up your sugar rationing to the baby?
Yes. I
Oh,
had to get sugar so that we could have a wedding cake.
yeah.
And several of our wedding presents were gasoline coupons so that we could take a little trip to New Hampshire.
Oh,
And all kinds of nice little things like that. I think we had to supply some butter also to something that was going on because that was rationed.
and when you married him, did you move to a house or did you still live with your parents?
I still lived with my parents
Still live with your
until
parents.
he was discharged.
Right.
And then we lived there until, Sherry wasn't born for another year and a half. And we stayed there until she was about 6 months old.
Uh-huh.
And then we moved back to Lexington to his old house with his father, who now was retired. And
Right.
so we moved in with him.
Oh, that worked out.
It worked out very, very well. And then when he got very sick, another son decided he and his family could take good care of him. I had my school going and so forth. And so we bought this house that I live in now and on East Street. And we moved there, and here it's 72 years ago. 73 years I've lived here.
I thought you told me you were going to have a 75th anniversary this year.
My anniversary, my wedding anniversary. But I'm saying how long I'd lived in this house.
72 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
We're the original owner of this house.
Wow, that's something. That makes it historic. It's over 70 years old.
Yeah.
Now, did he tell you a lot about his war experiences?
I think he told me almost every day. He enjoyed, every once in a while, he would enjoy saying, gee, this reminds me of, and we'd go on with another nice, interesting situation.
Yeah.
He enjoyed the people that he flew with.
Mm-hmm.
He had one interesting experience that I guess I'll tell you this. They were all warmed up, ready to go and leave and do something, whatever they did with their plane. And one of his friends another radio operator, came running across the field and said, Ward, they called, by the last names. He said, Ward, I've got a date tonight. Can I swap? He said, then I'm signed up to fly. Will you fly my time and let me go on my date and I'll do yours now? And Alan said, sure, okay. So he unplugged everything and he got off the plane. The other fellow got on. They turned the plane around, went to the end of the runway, and the plane blew up. He wasn't even back into the garage, the hangar.
Oh my goodness, and he saw his friend and it would have been him? Oh, that's terrible.
And, they were young enough, they were crazy young,
Yeah.
And he said his attitude at that point was, well, I guess it wasn't my time.
Wow.
Isn't that something? That's one of the biggie things I remember.
Yeah. He must have seen a lot on that China, Burma, India run because
he did.
That was a terrible
he did.
campaign over there.
He did. He said like you were working every minute.
Yeah. It had to be terrifying.
Yeah. But they all took it, that's why they had young people in the Air Force. This was all a great experience for these guys. Mm-hmm. They loved the crew they were with. They loved doing what they were doing. And wow,
Yeah, really exciting.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Alan made comments about that later on, too. He said, gee, I did things then that I would never do now. The only thing he did after he got a private pilot's license after he came home.
Oh, he did?
He wanted to do that. And I think that's where I'm very much interested in flying. In fact, I'm going to put in a little commercial now. I belong to the Massachusetts Air and Space Museum, mm-hmm. which is now open on the Cape.
Right.
And I'm so excited about that because my interest in airplanes have just stayed my whole life.
Yeah.
Alan got it started that way because he used to point out this plane and that plane and what it would do and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Now, let's go back a little to the home front before I wrap up here. Did you have a victory garden?
Absolutely. Everybody had a victory garden.
Okay.
You weren't being very patriotic if you didn't. And we had carrots and we had radishes and potatoes.
Tomatoes?
Lettuce and tomatoes. I would say probably that's the most I can think of.
Okay. Did your mother can and?
Oh, my mother canned beautifully. Yes, canned like mad.
Yeah.
I didn't learn to do much of that stuff. I was too busy doing other things, you know, and I wish I had learned a little more from at that time, but I did most of my learning after I got married.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I remember your high school career, and I'm not going to get into all that now. You were pretty busy there. Were you very aware of the rationing and the metal drives and all that?
We were very aware of rationing, very aware of it. It was on the radio all the time. Of course, no TV at that time, but it was on the radio all the time. And people, in Lincoln anyway, were very proud of the fact that everybody cooperated, and we, especially saving metal. Metal was all taken and recycled. And then we had rationed gas. We had enough gasoline to do your grocery shopping and things and to go to work. But
Right.
you didn't have any, you couldn't go off for Sunday drives all the time, you know. You saved up, if you saved your coupons and didn't need the gas, of course, you were careful and did that. And I remember we were not supposed to drive over 35 miles an hour because that also would conserve the gas.
Ah,
And we were not told very much about what was going off out on the other side of Boston. And we were supposed to pull our draperies shut at night, and all of our cars had headlights that everybody painted the headlights from the top through the middle so that they were black halfway down.
mm-hmm.
Everybody's headlights were black that way, so that if you did go out at night and you had your lights on, they didn't show as a sky glow.
Huh. Now, what about daylight savings time? Was that canceled, or?
I don't
I read
remember.
somewhere that it was canceled or was maintained.
You know, now that you bring that up, I do remember something about it, but I don't think it was too much of a problem.
Okay.
I can't quite remember it.
So if they changed it all, because I know there's great arguments whether they should change it back.
Yeah. Aren't they still arguing that?
Oh, yes, they're still arguing that. People don't like it. How would you compare that time to what we're going through now with the pandemic?
I think this is worse because we're aware day by day, almost half day by half day, what's going on.
Oh, that's true.
See, we didn't. The only time we saw any news is if you went to the movies. And the movies then weren't like they are now. Of course, there was no color. And the first part of the movies was always news reports. Well, some of the news that we saw might have happened 6 months before. And so we were not aware. In fact, some of us thought it was so stupid. I remember hearing my folks talk about how stupid it was to paint the headlights. And this thing about, you know, who's going to come over here from Europe and do any problem with us?
Oh.
See what we didn't know.
Yeah.
And here, right off of Boston, as I learned later, all the things that were happening. And we didn't hear about the stuff going to England that got bombed out unless someone was on one of the ships, you know, and then they were shipped home or were notified that they had drowned and that sort of thing. So you weren't as aware of, and I'm talking my own self, of course, but wasn't aware as much as you are today when you're practically, if it was an invasion, we'd be in part of the guys running on the sand.
Well, how did you find out about Pearl Harbor? The radio?
About what?
Pearl Harbor. How did you?
Oh, I was listening to the radio. I remember them talking about it, that it had happened. And I remember Roosevelt coming on and talking about, this is a day in infamy. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget
him in his speech.
Yeah.
Did you know
It
where
was,
Pearl Harbor was?
oh yes. In fact, Alan had played, I told her he had played professionally before he went into the service. And he was on a cruise ship with his guitar in a group, going from Los Angeles to Hawaii for the
Oh,
whole
nice.
summer.
Ruth. Yeah.
It was for the whole summer before, it was in 41, the whole summer.
Yeah.
So very much aware. And then I had a pen pal, and I wrote a letter on the first airmail
Oh.
plane. I really am old, aren't I? Yeah, I had a letter on that. So I was well aware of the Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, wow.
And that's where Alan was so familiar with them, because he'd been there like every weekend, all summer long. And so we were very much aware of where that had happened, at least in my house.
Okay, so you knew that. Did you follow his journeys in the Air Force on a map yourself?
Yep.
He did. My first husband talks about how he used to have pins, and he would pin different battles and stuff like that.
Of course, I'd get a letter that would say somewhere in Italy, somewhere in North Africa, somewhere in India. So all you could do was poke something wherever you wanted to in Italy or North Africa,
Because a lot of your letters were censored, I assume.
That's right. All of them were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it must have been really hard to feel close. When did he actually propose to you? Was it by mail?
Now, this is interesting. His father proposed to me.
What?
He had sent a letter home to his father and asked his father to propose. And his mother and father, I was very friendly with them. And so this particular night, they had dinner in the dining room. Everything was very lovely, and I was surprised at that. And at the end of it, his father got up and he came around the table and he said, "My son has asked me to do him a favor." He got down on one knee and he had Alan's class ring from Lexington High School.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it was 2 years before he came home. So I was 17.
Oh, wow. How did your parents feel about you being 17?
Oh, well, when I couldn't wait to tell my father. Oh, I was so excited to tell my father. And I said, "Is it okay? Can we get married?" And he said, "Where is he?" And I said, "Well, I think he's in India." "Sure, get married if you want to."
That's a
I love that. I was so excited. He went, "Where is he?"
That's a beautiful story.
It's a fun story.
Oh,
it was
really
fun.
Oh, and there's one other story you should tell that I already know. What did Alan, by the way, is it A-L-L-E-N or A-L-L-A-N?
A-L-L-A-N.
A-N, okay.
Yeah.
What did he bring you when he came home, when he stopped in Brazil?
He stopped in Brazil. I should have brought the pocketbook down. He brought me a beautiful alligator pocketbook that's like 12 by 14 size. And it's beautiful alligator, which I guess really is not nice to carry today, but it was beautiful. And a pair of nylon stockings, which was something, and a bottle of perfume, Chanel No. 5.
Oh.
Well, I tell you, it was just so exciting. I still have the pocketbook. I still have the bottle of Chanel No. 5, but it's empty.
And the nylons are well used, I expect.
Yes, yes. And I wore the stockings at my wedding.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
You were probably one of the few people with nylon stockings at that point, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I practically wanted to just pull up my dress and see that I had stockings, you know.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Will, we've done a good job here. Is there anything I think that I have missed?
Don't know. Alan, as I say, went on to teach guitar and
Worked at Frost and Higgins.
He taught here in Lexington. He had individual students, and he taught and he played professionally right up until a year before he died. He died of cancer, and it was only 9 months.
Oh.
And at the very end of his time, when he couldn't work at Frost and Higgins, he had worked for McKay Hardware, which was here in Lexington up on Bedford Street.
Mm-hmm.
And he enjoyed that very much. They were very nice people to work for. And other than that, he was a great guy. He was a great guy. And we had 36 years, which was great. There's a lot of people don't get that many.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And you obviously are still very much in love with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There wouldn't be anybody able to take his place ever.
Yeah.
Which is nice, you know.
Yeah. And good memories.
Yeah,
So,
good memories.
yeah.
And we have a daughter,
Yeah.
and we have 2 granddaughters.
Love.
And so that's fun too.
Yes, that is.
Yeah.
So I thank you for your time. We've spent a whole weekend together getting this all together.
We've had such a good time.
Yes, we did. But I've really enjoyed your stories. Now I got to go tell my husband about that wedding proposal. That's great.